This is just a quick disclaimer for this particular episode. Scouting is one of the most complex aspects of the game. This is by no means a complete roadmap to absolute perfect scouting every time. A huge part of scouting comes from experience, playing the game, getting better, learning to understand and see builds. Sometimes you have to face a build 10, 15, 20 times to be able to pick it up and figure out what's triggering that particular play. So, just a quick disclaimer to let everybody know that scouting is not perfect, never will be, but this should give you a very good guideline of what to look for. With that out of the way, my name is Filter Starcraft, and we are back for episode number 7 of my Bronze to Master series. This particular episode is going to deal with two things. It's going to deal with scouting and map control. Scouting and map control are two very important aspects to StarCraft 2. I feel the map control is one of the most overlooked parts of the game. It can make a huge difference between winning and losing. Scouting is probably the most overrated aspect of the game. It's still really important, but you're never going to be able to pick up exactly what your opponent's doing based entirely on the information you get from scouting him. Sometimes he's just bad, sometimes he'll do something weird, sometimes he'll spend all his chrono on probes, but still foregate you. Yeah, it comes a little bit later, but you don't expect it. One thing I've kind of noticed on a lot of my videos, there's a lot of comments where people are asking questions about scouting. There's even a few people that are having a hard time understanding that I can win games without scouting. So I'm starting to see those comments. This video should hopefully help address a lot of those. The one thing I do want to say is if you are in the Bronze League, if you are in the Silver League, if you are in the Gold League, you realistically don't need to worry too much about putting a lot of effort into your scouting. It's okay to scout and have it in your mind of what you might be looking for, but if you put more of your focus there and you mess up other parts of your play, scouting doesn't benefit you at all. You're going to find two different things in the description for this video compared to the old ones. First one's my Twitter account. I'm going to retroactively add that to all my videos. If you want to ask me questions, that's definitely the best place to do it. I don't particularly like how with the way YouTube comments work, every time I answer a question it shows up in the uploader comments. It's kind of takes away from what other people are saying. So hit me up on Twitter if you want to ask me questions. If you do type stuff in the comments, hey, awesome, go ahead. I still read them. I'm still going to respond to the ones that have questions, but I would just prefer it if you could do it on Twitter. The second thing that I'm going to have here is the notes for the different ways I'm going to scout in this particular video. So the notes that I'm going to use to create a description for you and all that are going to be in the description for the video. If you want to add them to a notepad or print them out and keep them handy, whatever, hey, go ahead, awesome. That's what they're there for. I want to try to give you as many tools as I possibly can to get better at the game. For those of you that don't know, I record my videos in two ways. When I play games, I record live commentary. When I'm not playing games and I'm trying to teach, what I do is record different parts of it individually so I can go back and change, get rid of parts where I don't feel like I make a very clear point. So with that being said, I actually had to scrap this, the first attempt at this particular video. It just wasn't up to par. I didn't make any real clear points and I wasn't happy with the production. So I've had to go back, redo all my notes. Hopefully this one's really good and a lot more clear. So with that in mind, the last video was me playing Gold League players using my Gold League video tactics, where I was not taking a third and I wasn't scouting. I'm going to add those two aspects into the Platinum videos. Now, these are going to be in split parts. The reason that I have to split them up is simply because it'd be too long and too much of an information-based video to really do anybody any good. I feel it's done best if I split up the parts. So I'm going to split up the two different parts here. Now, the advantage to that that's really cool is when I go to play the games, I'm going to play the Platinum League games using both of the techniques I'm going to teach. So you're going to get the scouting video and you're going to get the taking a third video back to back. And then, as a little bit of a bonus, I'm going to throw in some of my own Masters level play with commentary. So there'll be two videos for the actual Platinum lessons, and then there's going to be two gameplay videos right after that. Should be pretty cool. Hopefully everybody's looking forward to that. I know I'm definitely excited to hop on my Masters account and see just how much my own play has improved from just doing this video series. What I'm going to do now is just cover basic scouting and what you should be looking for when you're doing just very basic scouting. The video you're going to see in the background here is just of my basic scouting route. So that's typically when I go to a scouter race. Doesn't matter if it's Terran, if it's Protoss, if it's Zerg. All I do is just scout the natural, see if there's an expansion, because sometimes Protoss go Nexus first, that kind of stuff. Then I scout up through the main to check the gases, and then typically I'll leave the base and I'll do a couple different things depending on the race. When I play against Terran, things are a little bit different because you can't always get up the ramp, but I'm going to explain that a little bit later on here. Again, I want to overemphasize this. Nothing is ever perfect. You're never going to find a scout guide that's going to tell you exactly what the Protoss is doing 100% of the time based on what his chrono boost is at. Yes, it's a good indicator, it's something to look at. There's a lot of different things you can take a look at to try to get a feel for his build, but it's never perfect. So that means you don't want to do two things. You don't want to overreact to it. You don't want to go, oh, I know for sure he's doing DTs and then throw like 50 turrets everywhere, or he's going Cloak Banshee and then have like 10 turrets everywhere. Because what happens is if he doesn't go Cloak Banshee and his build's just bad, it'll catch you off guard with something else. So scouting is never perfect. Make sure you remember that. First major point I want to touch on for basic scouting, and I'll get into a little bit more detail about the types of groups for the different races, but just as we're doing with our buildings, we're not following a strict, stringent, I put this down at this time build order. There's a lot of flexibility in what we can do. We can go for tanks, we can go for bio, we can go for whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's quite easy with our basic building pattern. Now, you just have to apply that to scouting as well. When you do go scout his base, you want to make sure you're checking and putting things into groups of what he could be doing. You never want to try to pinpoint exactly what he's doing, because that's only going to lead you to trouble. A really good example of that is if a Protoss player has double gas really early, that could either mean he's going for Dark Templar, that could mean he's going for a Void Ray Stalker all in, it could mean he's going for Blink Stalker. There's a whole bunch of things. Even a Sentry expand is completely possible, so you don't want to stop your SCV production, you don't want to make 50 turrets to try to defend the DTs or anything like that, but what you do want to do is cover your bases where you can for that particular build. In terms of timing and when you should be going out to scout, I don't change my scout time based on the map or based on the race I'm playing against. Yes, there's certain situations where that's beneficial, but I like to just keep a nice even keel with the way I play. So what I do is I scout after I make my barracks when I'm doing my 1 racks fast expand. If I scout after my barracks, most of the time I can get into a Protoss base. Almost all the time I can get into a Zerg base unless he's going for something that's really aggressive. And with Terran, usually I actually don't get into his base, but I can tell a lot and get a lot of information from what his barracks looks like. So again, I just scout after my barracks. You're going to see it in the background video. One of the most commonly overlooked aspects of scouting is getting your SCV out in time to do what's called an expansion check. The expansion check is just pulling your SCV off to the side, maybe to his third, maybe a little bit further out of the way, so that around 6 minutes you can go in and check on his expansion. There's a couple of reasons this works really well. The first one is against Protoss. If he hasn't expanded by then, he's probably doing a 1 base all in, or he's bad. The second thing about that is when you do go back into a Zerg base to scout, typically if you can get to the mineral line, you can see how many drones he has. That's a really good indication of if he's doing some sort of crazy baneling all in or not at around the 7-minute mark. So again, you just want to keep your SCV. If you can pull it off to the side, that's awesome. When I talk about each race, I'm also going to talk about the effectiveness of using scans to figure out exactly what he's doing. Scans can be a great tool, but if you overuse them, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. When you are in the lower leagues and you want to just kind of burn a scan, make sure you're not doing it more than once a minute, even that's way too much. There's some very specific times that you can use to get a very good grasp on what he's doing in particular. And a scan doesn't cover both his bases, both his main and his natural, so you're never going to get perfect information. There's a lot of other really good techniques you can use, other than just flat out scanning his base. That being said, there are some specific times for scanning each race. I'm going to talk a little bit about those and why I think they're really good times to scan. Yourself, if you find there's a particular thing that keeps throwing you off guard and you know when you can throw a scan down and figure that out, hey, by all means, go ahead and do that. Now, I see a lot of players that don't know what they're looking for when they go to scout a base. There's 2 things you can check that'll give you a really good idea of what your opponent is trying to do, and you can kind of start making your groups based off that. So what you want to do when you get into his base is just kind of scout up and around. You want to avoid the mineral line as much as possible, go behind it, and check both his gas. Based on his gas and his gas timings, you can gather a lot of information about what he's trying to accomplish with this build. If you just kind of poke in and see a gateway and a pylon, and then leave and you kind of know where he is, you're not figuring out any information that's going to be of any use to you. You know he built a gateway, great. Every single Protoss in the game does that unless they're cannon rushing you, which can be bad, but hey, you'll figure that out really quick. The other thing you want to try to do is just count his workers and see if he's still making them. This is a pretty cool way to figure out if maybe there's something hidden or that kind of stuff. If you go into a Terran's base and you only see like 9 or 10 workers and the other guy's not just bad, assuming he's a good player, there's a pretty good chance you have a proxy outside your base, and that proxy could be a whole wide range of things. So definitely check the workers, make sure it looks fairly normal, and check the gas, see how many he's taken. I'm going to start talking about Protoss here. Again, remember, this is not perfect. This doesn't account for another player being bad. This doesn't account for another player trying to throw you off the scent of what he's really trying to do. But it should give you a pretty good indication of most things. So when you are scouting a Protoss, what you want to do is count his pylons. If you look in his base and you only see 2 pylons and his chrono boost is extremely high, try to hang around a little bit till his cybernetics core is done. If you can catch him chrono boosting his cybernetics core and he only has 2 pylons in his base, there's a really good chance it's a 4-gate. That being said, I have seen players that have made 4 or 5 pylons in their own base when they are 4-gating, so it doesn't necessarily cut it out. But as players get better and you start playing against better opponents, counting pylons is a really good way to identify a 4-gate. At the level I usually play at, that's pretty much the only indication I use. Check his chrono boost and I count the number of pylons he has. If I don't see that 3rd pylon go down, I'm pretty worried about it. The most obvious things are if there's a forge at his base, chances are he's going to cannon rush you, so you want to be really aware of what's around your base. The second thing about that is you want to check his probe count. So if you don't see anything at his front, there's a really good chance he's proxying Zealots and he's got a 2-gate proxy near your base. If his probe count's quite low, so it's in and around the 9 or 10 mark, typically, or even 12, but lower than it should be, and there's no gateway at the front, you're definitely getting proxied. So make sure you're scouting around your own base and you're scouting around the outside of your base. If you do discover that he is doing that, your bunker can hold it. If he comes before the bunker comes up, just lift everything off and get up to the high ground and you'll be fine. Now, with most normal players, when they don't have any gas and you scout into their base and you see a gateway, it's typically just a very fast Nexus. So if you see no gas, don't be too alarmed. It's not a big deal. It's usually a fast Nexus. However, that means you do want to double check that fast Nexus. So with that worker that you have sitting around, we're going to use him to check on that a little bit later on. Now the more complicated one is if he has 1 gas up. So if you see 1 gas, that's either a really fast expand or it's some sort of 4-gate pressure. You want to try to hang around in his base as long as you possibly can. So what I mean by that is as soon as the cybernetics core finishes, check the chrono boost. At that point you're probably going to want to try to leave his base and get your SCV off to the side so that you can go back in and check to see if it is either an expand or if it is a 4-gate. If it's a 4-gate, that's really dangerous and you're going to have to throw down an extra bunker or 2. If it's not a 4-gate and it's just a fast expand, you don't want to have those extra bunkers. They're going to slow your build down quite a bit. Now one of the most dangerous things Protoss players can do is take 2 gas really early. If they do take 2 gas really early, what you want to do is just check his Nexus, see what the chrono boost is like, and try to get a read on his cybernetics core. If he's not going to chrono his cybernetic core, or you see a double chrono go off, chances are it's some sort of void ray all in. Now there's always a chance that he's bad and he's doing something else and he's just forgetting to use chrono boost. I've seen that tons and tons of times too. So the other things you want to be aware of are potential DT rush. DT rush can be really devastating to everything you're trying to do. The other thing is a blink all in. The blink all in is probably the most dangerous of the 3 builds when we're dealing with what we're trying to do here, because we're going to have a lot of Marines really quickly. That's going to deal with any kind of void ray all in fairly easily. We're going to have that bunker up at the front, which is also going to help against the void ray all in. Blink stalkers are just going to avoid that and bounce right into our main. So again, it's really important that we go back and check to see if he's expanded, as well as check around our base for a proxy. If it is a void ray all in, it's usually a proxy, so you want to be looking around for it. If you don't see anything, you can almost always assume DTs or the blink all in. That being said, it could also be a Sentry expand. That's a very safe thing to do for a Protoss, depending on the map. Maps like Cloud Kingdom, where it's really easy to force field off your natural, that's a very viable build. So you don't want to overreact too much and be throwing down turrets everywhere and all that stuff. You want to be fairly certain of what he's trying to do. Now, there's 3 more things we want to do when we're playing against Protoss. After we've done our scout, we want to pull out after a cybernetics core comes up. The reason for that is we want that SCV to get out of there, so that we can use it to go back and check for a 3rd base later. So just pull that SCV, take it way off to the 3rd or whatever. Make sure he's not going to see it when he moves out with his stalker and Zealot to pressure you. A lot of times he'll just walk straight across the map and you can go right up into his base and see everything he's doing with your SCV. What I like to do is send my SCV in and around 6:30. So you can go from 6 minutes to 6:30. I usually go at about 6:30 because I can get a really good scout. Usually a second stalker is already halfway across the map by the time that SCV gets there. But it's really important to check for his second base at the 6 minute to 6 minute and 30 second mark, regardless of what build he's doing. As soon as you can confirm there's a Nexus there, you should feel very confident in the way you're playing, because you're going to out-macro him and you're going to absolutely crush that guy. So you're going to do two more things here. First one is that SCV that builds the second supply depot for you. You can actually use that SCV and scout around your base for any hidden garbage the Protoss player might be doing. If he's trying to counter rush you, you're going to see it in more than enough time with that particular SCV. You're also going to be able to see any kind of 2-gate all-in where he's proxying 2 gateways in your base, that kind of stuff, in time to stop it. It's really simple to do. That supply depot doesn't need to be up ASAP. It's not very important. It doesn't fit anywhere else in the build order though. Like you can't get your command center before it without causing you to miss marines and stuff like that. So you can delay it a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. Just to check around your base and check all the areas you don't have vision of to see if he's trying to proxy or pull any junk in your base. Really easy way to stop any of those stupid losses. If you've ever had a pylon in your base and lost because of it, I know I have. It's a really easy way to get around that. The other thing you want to do is keep in mind when you're scouting his base, you're going to know when his first stalker comes out. So with that knowledge, you can take your really early marines and just scout around the outside of your base and look for any proxies. Some really common places to proxy stuff are on Antigua Shipyard. You can proxy in either the main or the third of the base that's closest to you. So if you see a probe sneak up into your base, doesn't try to harass you and leaves immediately, can be a good sign of a proxy, so you want to hunt that probe down. Just send your marines around when you think the stalker's coming, get them back into your base. As long as you check for all the major proxy zones, you should be relatively safe. In a lot of cases, you'll actually catch him trying to do something. So the next thing we're going to do here is learn how to scout against Zerg. Zerg is pretty basic to scout. The only thing you can really tell off what they're doing early game is if they're doing some sort of really stupid one base all in. It's typically fairly easy to spot. So what you want to do when you get to the Zerg space is just count his drones. If he only has 9 or 10 drones and his pool feels a little bit fast, chances are he's going to do some sort of really aggressive all-in with either Zerglings or Banelings, something like that. Now there's two things you can check when you're in a Zerg space. First one is his pool. When his pool is done, that's a good time to get out of his base. However, what you do want to check when he makes his pool is how many eggs he has at his main hatchery. If he has 3 larvae and he makes 3 eggs right away, chances are those are all Zerglings, so you want to be prepared for a little bit of aggression from him. Doesn't always mean he's going to get super aggressive, and if he doesn't have any gas, he's probably not going to be, but again, you just want to stay safe. So check those eggs, see how many Zerglings he's making. The second thing you want to check is his gas. If he doesn't have any gas yet, he's probably going to take a quick third. If he does take gas, check his drones. Just hang around, wait around, wait around. Typically, a Zerg that's going for any kind of really fast speedling expand will have his gas up before his pool, and he will have the 100 gas as soon as his pool finishes. In a situation like that, where he's mined quite a bit of gas, you actually want to keep your SCB and hang it around as much as possible to see if he pulls drones out of gas or if he leaves them in. Now, the thing to keep in mind with this is Zergs can be tricky. He might just be bad and leave drones in, or he might be trying to trick you by leaving drones in, and you're thinking that he's going to do a roach all in.
Not enough minerals.
Now the other thing about that is, if he pulls his drones out of gas and then puts them back in as soon as he finishes killing your SCV, there's also a chance he can do a roach all in. So it's not foolproof, but if you want to check his gas, all gas geysers have 2,500 resources in them. If it's at 2,400 and he pulls all his drones out, you know he's just going for speed and probably nothing else. And of course, as you leave his base, you want to check to make sure he's expanded. Now, I didn't talk about scanning the main base against Protoss because they can hide their tech so easily. I don't feel there's a huge benefit or any really good timing to scan a Protoss base. I know there's some exceptions with some builds out there that rely on a really good scan. I don't really feel it's worth it to scan a Protoss. However, with Zerg, there's some really great times you can scan them and get a ton of information. So the main one you're going to want to hit when you scan a Zerg is just scan his main around 8 minutes and 30 seconds. That's going to give you a really good indication of what his tech is, or if his tech's slow, or if he's going to do an all-in. So by 8 minutes and 30 seconds, he should have a Lair started. If he doesn't have a Lair started, any kind of tier 2 tech that he brings out is going to be super late, and you should be able to kill him off unless he has a ton of Banelings. Now, I didn't talk about it when I mentioned Protoss, because I don't think there's a lot of information you can really scan out of a Protoss base. If he's trying to hide something, he'll hide it. He can make it anywhere on the map, so you don't gain a huge amount of benefit from scanning Protoss, at least in my experience. However, I do think there's a really key timing that you can scan Zerg and get an absolute ton of information for. A little while ago in the metagame, Zergs were making their lair at their natural. That still happens from time to time, but Zergs have started to realize that your Lair can get killed off really easily there, despite the fact it has extra hit points. If you lose your Lair, you lose the game. So Zergs are starting to make their main their Lair. Well, not even starting to make it their Lair. They pretty much do it every time now. Now, the key thing about that 8-minute and 30-second timing is you should either see his Lair just pop, or his Lair's not started. In both of those situations, you're going to be able to figure out how far away his Spire is, or how far away his infestors are. The really cool thing about this is, if he doesn't have a Lair started by 8:30, there's no Mutalists until 12 minutes, and there's no infestors until 12 minutes. That means when you come with your push to attack at 10:50, he doesn't have anything, and he's going to be forced to spend his gas on Baneleys to defend that push. That's a really cool timing to keep in mind. Even if he kills off your entire army, because he has a ton of Banelings there, whatever his follow-up tech is going to be severely weakened. If he had 500 or 600 gas banked, and he had to spend that all on Banelings, he's not going to have very many Mutalists after the fact, because you just can't get gas that quickly. Now I'm going to cover map control a little bit deeper, which will help with this situation, but if he hasn't started a Lair, and he hasn't finished a Lair by 8 minutes and 30 seconds, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get a big time bust coming at you, especially if you see a Roach Warren and a Baneling nest when you scan. If you see those two buildings and he doesn't have a Lair, what you need to do is just immediately throw down 2, 3, 4 extra bunkers. It's not even a bad idea to move into tank production if you haven't been doing tanks yet. So just keep that in mind. That 8:30 scan against Zerg can be absolutely money. Now I compared the 8:30 scan timing to a few professional Korean replays I've been watching. What I found with that 8:30 scan timing is one player in particular made 12 roaches just about the same time you would have scanned. A lot of those came from the main, so that's not usually a drone round. It looks like a pretty aggressive round of units, as he's kind of waiting for one particular time to make them all. That being said, those 12 roaches would have been no problem to stop for the army that you're going to have at that point, especially with a bunker up at your front. Now, the second point that makes this key is you know he's not going to have Mutalists, and you know he's not going to have infestors until 12 minutes. That means your attack is going to be extremely powerful and difficult for him to stop, and if he does stop it, and believe me, I've had my attack stopped plenty of times, he's going to have to invest so much in stopping it that it's going to hurt him in the long run. Now we're going to cover Scouting Terran. Scouting Terran is easy and difficult at the same time. So what I mean by that is a lot of times you're just not going to get into his base. You have to figure out ways to get around that. If you do get into his base, what you want to look for is his gas. If he's taking one gas really early and there's nothing on the barracks, there's no tech lab or anything like that on the barracks, by the time your SCV gets shot to pieces, then you can make a pretty safe assumption that he's going Banshee. However, you're going to confirm that with a follow-up scan a little bit later on. So you can be a little bit aware of it, but it's not make or break. He can do a lot of things with that gas. The second thing you want to look for, though, is a tech lab on the barracks or a bunker. If you see a tech lab on his barracks, then he's probably doing a Reaper expand. That's almost a guarantee, as a matter of fact. If he is doing a Reaper expand, you just want to position one Marine at the front in your bunker, and you want to have a couple of Marines in the back where you can jump into your base. Some maps, there's a lot of places to jump in, but typically a player will try to jump in as close to your mineral line as possible. 2 Marines do kill a Reaper if the Reaper's jumping up, but you won't take any damage. Now, if he does have a bunker in his base, there's a really good chance he's rushing for a Cloak Banshee. In that particular situation, you want to make sure you're getting ready to save scans, because you're going to need to scan his base to confirm he's making a Banshee, as well as save scans to kill the Banshee later on. You're going to have enough Marines to kill the Banshee unless he has absolutely perfect micro. Not a lot of players do unless they're Korean, so don't worry too much about a Banshee. Now, the last thing to be aware of is when you go up to his ramp and you see a supply depot and 2 barracks, or a supply depot on the low ground, and that supply depot has a supply call down on it, he is all-inning. In that type of situation, you want to try to evacuate your low ground if at all possible. If not, you're going to have to pull SCVs to make sure that bunker at your front is repaired. Now, the last thing you want to do is an expansion check on the Terran. Because Terran can make their base in their main, you want to try to check that a little bit later, usually around 7 minutes. That's going to involve not scanning, but sending an SCV out. So you're going to want to send an SCV around the map to avoid any kind of watchtowers or potential Marines, and try to get that SCV in. If you don't confirm that he has a command center there, so that means your SCV gets shot up before it gets up there, don't assume the command center's there, and just be ready with your map control for any kind of all-in that could come. If you do confirm that he has an expansion, awesome. He's trying to play a macro game against us, and he's not going to win it. Now the last point I'm going to make about scouting a Terran is map control is absolutely vital. You need to have map control in a TVT. If you don't have map control, you're going to lose a lot of games just because you didn't see his army coming at you and he got sieged up in a good position. If you can see him moving out with a force, you can kind of get ready to prepare for it. Whether that means you're going to need to build extra bunkers, pull SCVs, start tank production of your own, whatever, but it's really important to have those watchtowers. I'm going to talk about map control next, so it makes for a really easy transition. Specifically when I talk about map control here, this map control is very basic. It changes a lot as the game turns to late game. Things change with tanks and stuff like that coming into play. So this is designed to be really basic and really early map control. Why you need to get it, and how you're going to be able to accomplish that against the 3 different races. Now, the first thing I really want to bring up here is not very many people do map control well. Even in Masters League, even in Grandmasters League, even at the professional level, there's a lot of situations where holding a watchtower would be very, very simple, but for whatever reason the player just isn't doing it. So you really want to make sure you can control the watchtower. Now, the second thing about basic map control is just putting Marines in key locations. Examples of key locations include somebody's third base. On Cloud Kingdom, there's a lot of places where somebody can flank you. You want to have a Marine there. If there's a drop location, like Antigua Shipyard, having a Marine just on the outside, on the opposite base to you, can definitely help you out big time. So just make sure, don't be afraid to throw a couple of Marines at expansions and a couple of Marines in different spots on the map to spot for drops or any kind of garbage play the other player might be doing. Having map control like that will make you a much, much better player, and the only reason for that is you're going to see what's coming at you. If you see a drop coming at you and you can pull all your guys back and just shoot the drop down before it gets into your base, you're a better player than just watching that drop kill 8 SCVs because something else hit you and you didn't notice it. Now, the way you take map control changes based on the race you're playing against. When you're playing against Protoss, Stalkers take map control away from Marines. So what you want to do is send a Marine out to your watchtower really early. If you're confident that you can pull it back in time. You don't actually have to do this, but it can help you out. If you spot like 3 Stalkers coming at you, you're going to be ready to pull SCVs a lot faster. So just make sure, throw a Marine up there as long as you're confident you can pull him back in time. Now you're going to want to clear that watchtower as soon as possible. The reason for that is there's a couple of really nasty timings like 8 minutes and 30 seconds and 10 minutes where you're not going to be out on the map with your army. You want to make sure you control that watchtower so that you can spot any kind of large Protoss force that's moving out. Especially spotting it with a probe is kind of a big deal. So in order to take that watchtower back from whatever unit might be at it, what you want to do is have a Marine lead out. So you have a Marine well in front of the rest of your army. As soon as you get a Marauder, you can do this. So that Marine is going to lead out. If you run into like 5 Stalkers or something, just pull back to your base. If there's nothing there and you can get to the watchtower, just pull that Marine back if he's getting shot at. Use the rest of your army to chase the Stalker away and leave a Marine there. You're going to want to pull that Marine back if he tries to take map control back from you, but in a lot of cases the other player is just going to give up the watchtower and assume your army's there. You don't want to leave your whole army at the watchtower though, because a lot of Protoss players do use warp prisms and stuff like that, and if you're slow at reacting, 4 Zealots can trash your mineral line. So you want to make sure you just have 1 Marine at the watchtower, but as soon as you get a Marauder, go take care of that watchtower and make sure it's yours. The last thing about playing against Protoss is you can be really confident about moving out on the map once you get medevacs. Now, one of the best techniques to use for this is to have 1 Marine leading your army again, so that any kind of interception where he might have a ton of Zealots and Sentries or something that would really kill your army, you're going to be able to spot it with that Marine that's leading the way for you. When you're moving around with your medevacs and Stimpack, you're going to have no trouble because you can pretty much retreat from anything crazy. If he has a fast Colossus or something like that, it shouldn't give you too many problems. Again, once you have medevacs, be active on the minimap. You're going to be looking to attack him anyway, so this will kind of come naturally. Now, if you're playing against a Zerg player, one of the biggest reasons the Hellion Expand became popular is because it is so easy to get map control. However, because we're trying to keep everything very similar in terms of how we play each matchup and the type of buildings we get, we're not using the Hellion Expand opening just yet. If you want to use it in your own time, hey cool, go ahead, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we're not using it yet. So what that means is, if we want to get the watchtower, all you have to do is send 2 Marines out to the watchtower near your base. When you send out those 2 Marines, it should kill any Zergling or whatever is there. If those 2 Marines run into like 12 or 14 or 16 Zerglings, or a really large number that looks like they're going to get baneling busted, or they run into a bunch of roaches, that's going to give you enough time to throw down a couple of extra bunkers and stay safe. Losing those 2 Marines for that information, more than worth it. Once you take the watchtower, just pull one of the Marines back, whichever one's hurt, and just leave one Marine there. You don't necessarily need to keep two there to maintain the Watchtower. Now, if you're controlling that Watchtower, you're going to be able to spot any kind of all-in the Zerg does typically towards you. You're going to see roaches coming, you're going to see a lot of Zerglings coming if he's trying to make a big attack. Zerg's all-ins rely on the Terran player not seeing it and being surprised by the attack. So if you have 4 bunkers backing it up, it doesn't matter if he does some insane huge baneling bust, you're going to be way ahead of him because his economy is going to be so low behind the attack. Now, the same situation applies. Once you get medevacs, you can start being a little bit more aggressive with your army and try to retake some of the map control maybe you don't have with the Hellions. So what you want to do again is just have a Marine lead your army. That's going to make sure you don't run into any huge amount of Zerglings or anything like that, and you should be pretty safe. Now, when you start to approach his base and you're entering on creep, scan right in the middle of the creep and try to kill off all the creep tumors you can and then pull your army back. You don't want to just run up onto creep, because if he has banelings or something like that, you're not going to be able to get away in time. So it's really important to kind of kill the creep in small bits. If you scan up and you see he has a ton of Zerglings and there's no banelings, if you think your army is going to win that fight, by all means go up and attack. It's not a big deal if all the Zerglings come flying at you if there's no banelings to connect. If there are banelings though, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So you want to make sure you kill off as much creep as you possibly can. Some Zerg players are really good and they'll have a huge creep spread almost all the way out to half the map. You're going to have to kill that. So it can be a little bit of a pain, but make sure you kill the creep and you're not trying to fly up and engage on it. If you do get caught on creep, you're probably going to lose a whole bunch of units. Now, when you're dealing with Terran and getting map control against Terran, it can be quite a challenge. If the other Terran player has a Reaper, for instance, you're going to have to wait until you get a Marauder out before you can go take that Watchtower back off him. So you want to kind of keep that in mind. The big thing is though, just send out 2 Marines, try to take your Watchtower. If you can, awesome. Just leave those 2 Marines there. If he comes to try to take it back, a lot of cases he won't. Those 2 Marines are going to be able to handle whatever comes at them. If it's something like a Hellion, then yeah, they might both get roasted if he's really good with his micro, but if you just split them up a little bit, you'll actually beat the Hellion most of the time. I talked a little bit about it earlier, but what you want to do is have Marines in drop lanes. So if the other player is trying to drop you, you're going to notice it a lot sooner with your Marine in the drop lane. You can also throw Marines in different spots of the map to check for expansions, so maybe check for if he's taking a 4th, that kind of stuff. Definitely be active with a couple of Marines just scouting around, making sure he's not trying to do anything silly on you. Now there's 2 other points to make about Terran map control. The one thing is, because Terran has dropships and Banshees, they can bypass your map control completely. So don't rely 100% on that. You want to make sure your army's in a good position and you're always paying attention to your minimap so that you can spot when a drop comes in. Terran's the only race that really gets the advantage to completely bypass any sort of map control you have at an early stage of the game. So you want to be really, really careful of that. The other thing about having excellent map control is if your opponent decides to go mech. If he decides to go mech and you have a Watchtower and you can set up a flank and just crush all his tanks, that's GG. So you want to make sure you have really good map control against somebody who is going tanks. If they end up getting up to the front of your base and they're sieged up, you're going to lose that game 9 times out of 10. If you see him leaving his base with his mech army, you can make it take forever for him to get there, and you can do a lot of damage to him in other ways, or you can just catch him unsieged and kill everything he has. So that's going to bring us to the end of this particular episode of Bronze to Masters. Now, there's a ton to take in. This particular episode is probably the most complex episode that I'll have made. There is no simple buffer. There is no easy way to check to measure your own progress with this. With scouting, it's all about experience, knowing what to do when you see certain things, and just playing the game a lot. These are some really good benchmarks that can help you out. Especially map control, that's kind of a big one. If you really work on that, your game's going to get a lot better. The one thing you don't want to do though is focus so heavily on this scouting and this map control side of things that the other parts of your game fall apart. So what you want to do is, while you're attempting to do all this, make sure you're still cleaning up and hitting all the other metrics that I've laid out. If you're able to play like this and maintain almost perfect map control and maintain really, really good scouting while doing everything you need to do in the background, you're going to be almost unstoppable.
Upgrade complete.
Obviously, this guide does not cover every possible situation for every possible scout. That would be like a 500-hour video. So take the time to learn from your own timings and the own stuff you see. If you die to a build and you're like, oh, that build was stupid, and you watch the replay and you're like, I could stop that no problem next time, awesome, you just learned something. If you die to that build a second time, then you're going to want to make sure you kind of know what to be looking for and how to expect and prepare for that. This is probably the most difficult episode I've had to put together. I put it together once already and I was not happy with the results, so I've gone back and redone absolutely everything. I think this time it's a much better episode about scouting. Tackling scouting and how to do it properly and what to look for was probably the most challenging thing that I've tried to explain with these videos so far. Everything else is something you can measure. Everything else is something you can practice. Scouting is one of those things that just sort of you get better at as you experience it. But if you have a few pointers along the way, it can definitely help you out. So hopefully this episode was good. Hopefully you guys learned a lot. I understand if your brains are trying to take it all in, because this is a really complicated episode. It took me a long time to get it right, but I think I have. If you do enjoy it, hit the like button. If you enjoy the rest of my videos, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm actually really enjoying doing this, and I'm really enjoying improving my own game along with the rest of you guys. I'll see you guys next time with my next episode, which will be how to take a third properly. Again, that's going to be targeted at a platinum leader, but I feel once this series of videos is done and once I finish the next one, that this series will be able to take you all the way to Masters, even though it's only labeled up to platinum. When I look at Diamond League and Master League stuff, those are things that are going to add into your game and just make you an unstoppable rock. If you can take a third successfully and get your production up and scout properly, and hit everything else, you're going to be just an amazing, phenomenal player at this game. So definitely don't be afraid to keep improving, keep hitting those benchmarks, keep getting better. You're going to be able to come a long way. As always, leave comments below, hit me up on Twitter if you want. Have a good one, guys.